Hello and welcome to the Workplace Options Podcast. My name is James Callender. I am the Director of Business Solutions Australia, New Zealand, and I am joined by Elliot Pring, licensed mental health first aid facilitator and provisional psychologist here for Workplace Options Australia. Welcome, Elliot.
Thanks for having me, James. Happy to be here.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I am recording this podcast, the Warramai people, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. The topic that we are here to chat through today is something that you and I are living and breathing at the moment. Not so much sleep involved in it though. This topic being the journey of first-time dads or first-time fathers, and the new skills that we are learning which we didn't know we needed. And touching on, I guess, the importance of taking care of your family, but also taking care of yourself throughout this process. Or throughout this journey, I should say. It's not a process. It's a journey.
Yeah, definitely a journey, that's for sure.
One child for you, Elliot?
Yeah, just the one. So she's 7, just ticked over 7 months now. So yeah, it's just been an absolute whirlwind. I feel like the first sort of 2-3 weeks, those days just were, so long and the time went so slowly. And now I'm looking back on those days going, oh man, this has just gone so quick.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We have Wesley, who is 2 and a bit, and his young sister Harriet, or affectionately known as Harry. Yeah. Harry is coming up 8 months. Yeah, so we're in a very similar boat with number 2. But you mentioned there around the first few weeks felt so long, and then the subsequent months have just flown by. And it's the same for Emma and I. We at times really have to focus when remembering what it was like, A, as a couple, but B, as a family of 3 before Harry came along. It's crazy how saturating, I guess, becoming a dad and growing the family is.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because it's like you feel like the time goes so quickly when you're reflecting on it, but every single day feels longer than the days that you had before being a family, right?
Yeah.
The days are longer, but the weeks are shorter, if that makes sense.
Very much so. And I don't know about you, but I genuinely wish it was, especially from a pregnancy perspective, that it was more equitable. Like, I feel like my wife goes through so much, like mentally and physically, and then those early months as well, I guess, with the importance of the mother and child time. I just feel like I wish I could have done more in that process. What was your experience?
Absolutely the same. Absolutely the same. And I found what was really hard in those first few weeks was, just constantly asking myself, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough here? I feel like I'm doing something, but is it enough? And, I think it all sort of comes down to, one of the factors is, I guess how you're choosing to, raise this child in terms of how it's fed. Is it breastfed? Is it bottle fed? That kind of thing. For us, we're doing breastfeeding and that means, from my standpoint, there's not much I can do with that kind of thing. So in those first few weeks, I'm just like running around the house trying to figure out, what can I do? Can I clean this for you? Can I do this for you? Can I get you some water? But you don't feel like you're, as you said, in terms of that equitable relationship, you don't feel like you're giving that same kind of like feeding the child, outcome. And I think, something that kind of helped me with that and got me through that was just having conversations with my wife and just really just asking her, am I doing enough right now?
Yeah.
And she'd be like, yes, that's fine. Like, you've got me the water. You've cleaned this. Just go sit down,
Yeah. I got in trouble for, at times, doing too much.
Yeah.
And because I was saying thing like I needed to busy myself around home. and my wife was like, can you just leave some of the adult tasks for me to do so that I still feel like an adult? And then I'm not just this feeding machine. I can still get a sense of satisfaction from actually doing some of the adult tasks that I know that I'm very capable of doing. So I had to watch myself, and that means I had to sit on my hands for a little bit and not over service or over cater.
And that can be uncomfortable sometimes, right? Especially when you've been working full time, and then you've got this leave, you've got this time to look after a baby, and you go, okay, well, sole focus is for baby. Get everything done that you can get done so that mum's job can be, as easy as it can be, without any kind of, I don't know, barriers or things that pop up out of the blue. But what kind of happens is you get to that point and realize that, mum kind of wants to do some other things as well, other than just taking care of the bub. So I think, what it really comes down to for me, and what's been helpful for me, is just continually having those conversations about, is this what you want to be doing right now? Would you like to do something else? Is there some way that we can swap around what's going on right now? Are you happy doing what you're doing right now? And just I think conversation and just communication as much as possible has probably been the most helpful thing for me to get me through, especially those early weeks, but, pretty much every week since we've become a family unit.
Very much so. And not assuming, in that process.
Absolutely.
Elliot, you mentioned leave there. Were you fortunate to take some time off with the arrival?
Yeah. So I was quite fortunate. I took 6 weeks off, which is time that I cherish dearly, and I do not regret taking. It's something that I would recommend to any dad, first time dad out there. If you can get more leave, however much leave you can get, take it. You're not going to get that time back. You're never going to get that time back from becoming a first-time father. The more time you can spend with that child in the early days, especially, even when you feel like, that there's not much, you might feel like there's not much bonding to begin with because, you might not be doing the feeding or for whatever reason, there might not be that same attachment that you feel to begin with because, mum's carried the baby for 9 months. She's gotten to know the baby over this 9 months. She's felt every movement from it, but you didn't have that. And I felt what was really helpful for me was just having, that 6 weeks just to spend every minute just with that baby and have that time to bond with it. And that was something that, I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And I look back on really, really fondly.
I agree with you. And I was very fortunate to have a similar experience with our firstborn. He was born into lockdown. And so I was also working from home at the time. So I had that proximity to both mother and child, and I was able to provide, I guess, that hands-on support here at home. And I was very fortunate. My employer at the time had a very generous parental leave policy, so I was able to take 3 months paid leave and within the first 12 months of life. So I then had 3 months when my wife went back to work at 9 months. I had the balance. I had the 3 months off then to be a full-time dad, which was so incredible. To have that hands-on experience and to feel that. And in fact, our second was due around the time that I joined Workplace Options. And that was something that I had to weigh up. Moving away from an employee that had that sizable parental leave program. And so I didn't get that opportunity with our second. And that's something that I continually reflect on, that I had 2 weeks leave, which was fantastic. But I certainly didn't have the 3 months leave. And so I need to process that myself and within my family unit, like what that means for my wife and our firstborn and our secondborn. And even for me mentally, being cognizant of the fact that it wasn't like I gave more attention to baby one. I just had the opportunity to spend more time at home with them. So that means, given that I don't have that extra leave, I need to be really present in the time that I am at home, to almost compensate in some respects.
Yeah, I absolutely see where you're coming from with that. And it's almost like, in terms of having the less time, it kind of makes you go, okay, well, we've got to make this quality. We've got to make
Yeah.
this a quality time that I can have. It's going to be limited. How do I make the most of it? And like, as you said, it's just being present the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Being as present as possible.
And I think I saw some emerging statistics this year, that with the changes in parental leave here in Australia, how they're seeing, I guess, some new trends in terms of the balance between mothers and fathers, or each parent sharing in that leave. And I think that's really great. As a society, we move forward and fathers see that they do have an opportunity to play an active role in those very early days, weeks, months, years, whereas potentially for our fathers and their fathers' fathers, that may not have been something that was accepted or made available to them.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think I've seen some similar data on that, the younger generations, the fathers are having that ability to spend more time with their children, especially in those early days. And I think that's just a net benefit for everyone, right? That's just, I don't see really a downside to that. And I think it's a really good thing that, that there is this other option out there of a father that can stay at home more, a father that can be at home more, spend more time with the kids, adopt roles that weren't really seen as, traditional, in the past. I think that's fantastic now that that's being embraced and is starting to be, a normal way of doing things, essentially.
Yeah, very much. And I feel very fortunate to be living through that. Elliot, you mentioned there previously around being present and quality time. So we know that now as dads, we have to allocate our time to more. Time doesn't increase. There's still a certain number of days in the hours in the day. How, I guess, have you navigated giving time to your partner, to your role, to your family, to your child, but also, I guess, to yourself, and making sure that you're looking after your own emotional and physical well-being?
It's a great question. And honestly, I still think it's something that I'm figuring out. I would say that, very, very early on, I recognized how important each minute is in the day. When you have a child, so much of your time is occupied by that, and that's great. But it's something that you have to accept, that you're just going to have less time for social activities, less time for, doing things that you may used to have enjoyed. And, you just recognize that every single minute is so, so important, and how you decide to use it is so, so important as well. And I think what has been helpful for me, maybe I'll talk first about self-care.
Yeah.
Because that's something that, I talk a lot about in my profession, but also it's been something that I've been trying to walk the walk as well. And I guess something that I found helpful was going, well, look, there's less time for these things now. That's just a fact of life. It's just something I'm going to have to deal with and accept. So what were those things that I used to do? What were those things that I did before having a family that brought me lots of enjoyment, that brought me lots of fulfillment? What were those activities or things that I used to do? So I had a bit of a think about that. What were those things? And then I went, okay, so what are the ones that gave me the most enjoyment and the most fulfillment that required the least time investment? And then I thought, okay, what are those ones? What are the ones that have the least time investment that can be realistically put into my day? When there's naps, that kind of thing. What are the things that I can do that are going to require the least amount of time that gave me the most bang for my buck, really?
Yeah.
And I found, the two ones for me, I sort of have a history. I used to teach music. I used to teach guitar. So one of my things is playing guitar. And something that was really good about that is that I've noticed that my daughter loves to listen to that. So that's kind of been really helpful because it's good for me. It's good for her. It's a win-win situation. The other thing I found was just, when I can, going to the gym for 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be long. It just has to be something where I can just switch off, focus on this one thing and just get all those physical benefits from doing that. And to make that work, it's something that we would it's something right now that we schedule in advance. So I speak to my wife about it. Okay, what's the day that this can actually be realistically achieved, where it's going to be the least type of, deviation from our routine. And we just schedule that in advance so that, it doesn't feel like it's come out of nowhere. We know what's happening. And then also what we do is we go, okay, well, if I've got that, what's something that you can have as well so that it feels equal, so that we feel that, one person isn't getting one over the other person. And so that there's this kind of equality, like what we were talking before with, how do we make this equitable, right?
Yeah. No, and that comes down to that communication piece. And it's very similar in our household, all whilst now balancing 2 children and hopefully eventually 3. But my 2 things would be exercise. Like exercise provided me with so much structure in the past. My days would begin at 5 with exercise and would end at 7 with exercise. So most days it would be twice a day. And that's something that I haven't been able to fit in, and mentally trying to process that has been a real challenge for me, because I know that I get so much of my energy and endorphins from exercising. And when I can't do that, I'm trying to come up with strategies to compensate. And then naturally you throw in the impact of work and commuting for work. You lose less time, or you've got less time to dedicate towards exercise. And equally, that was probably my wife's number one thing as well, was exercise for her. And that was where we met. And so now we kind of divide and conquer with the kids. So similar to yourself playing your guitar to your daughter, I will take one or both kids to the gym with me. I'm very lucky where I live that I have a surf club and it's a fairly stress-free environment there, so I can take the kids there and they can have a play while I work out. But that was something that was really important to me, something that I continually work on to make sure it is present. And the other one that brought me joy was just cooking dinner. Really feeling like I could contribute to the household in a meaningful way. And to be honest, since baby number 2's come along and my work travel schedule has changed, that's been really challenging to stick to. And so naturally coming back to communication, it's having a chat to my wife around, okay, the days that I'm not traveling for work, okay, how can I cook dinner for for the whole family at that point in time to try and get that sense of enjoyment back, and fulfillment and contribution to the family unit.
Because it's very easy for those things to just slip away without you noticing, right? It's sort of, for me, especially what I find is that I might go for about 4 or 5 days and, I just haven't engaged in any kind of self-care, and there was no warning signs or anything. It just happens. Yeah. And so I think something that's been really helpful for me, as you're talking about before, we've talked about this whole time, communication seems to be the key, right? I also think just having communication with yourself is also the key. So, checking in with yourself. It's okay not to be okay sometimes. Keep a barometer on yourself on how your mood's going, because, we can just go on autopilot, right? Looking after the kids, being at work, you just go on autopilot. You adopt the role. You do what you have to do. And the last thing you think about is checking in with yourself. So that's something that I've found helpful as well, to sort of just go, okay, well, look, where's my mood at today? Oh, it's actually at maybe a 4 out of 10. maybe I need to do some self-care. How do I schedule that in? How do we have a conversation about, look, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to get back to. I want to be at my best for you and the family. How do I get back to that?
Yeah, I think that reference there of you just do what you have to do, or you get done what needs to be done. It can be a bit of a trap at times.
It can
That
be. Yeah.
you get on those rails, or you get in that groove, and sometimes it's hard to pull yourself out of it. And you're right, you need to check yourself and make sure that you are still getting personal fulfillment as well as fulfilling the roles that you have to your family, to your employer, sporting commitments, or so on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, I guess one thing that I did want to ask you, because you're, a little bit further ahead in that kind of family journey, something that I would love to get to at some point is having more children. And I'm wondering, I have a bit of an idea of how my life has changed having the first child. But I'd like to hear from you. I mean, what have been the changes to having the second one? What were some of the unexpected changes? The things that you kind of went, oh man, this is something that I totally didn't see coming from having a second child.
So we have 18 months, just over 18 months between the two of them. And something that was unexpected and I needed to check myself on was the unrealistic expectations that I had a tendency to place on our eldest. And number one being listening.
Yeah, right.
So at 18 months, he hadn't grasped the full concept of listening. He is still learning how to listen. But when you bring a newborn home and you are telling them not to touch or to be careful or to move away, all of these instruction orientated, I guess, well, they're just instructions really, but he hadn't learned to listen yet. And I was putting these unrealistic expectations on him, all because we had a newborn at home that he would know. And that was really something that I needed to check myself on. And I would also say another lesson that both my wife and I have learned is still giving time to the eldest on his own.
Right.
For example, yesterday, so on Wednesdays, my parents usually look after our son, our eldest. And yesterday my wife reversed it. So she gave our youngest to my parents and she just had a day with my son, and it was such a refreshing and recharging experience for them both to be able to connect and for him to get that attention and to not be told, don't touch, don't go there, etc. And my wife was reflecting on the improvement in his behavior, because he wasn't being barked at. He was just him, and he could be his own self, and really, I guess, interact and respond with his mum. And so that's two lessons that we have really taken out of this experience. But from a parenting perspective, and I guess the third, on more of a personal note, is making time for each other. So in the past, when maybe you would go to sleep, naturally you'd be able to connect with each other. Now you've got two different children on two different nap schedules. Then you've got to clean and prepare for the next day, but making sure that there's still time for the two of you. And quite often I say that I'm a husband first and a father second, because I met my wife first, and I really want to make sure that I'm respecting that and honoring that and being present with her and giving her the time that she desires and requires.
And so how have you navigated that? Because, you're mentioning there's the two different nap schedules and that kind of thing, something that in my mind, I'm already trying to put the puzzle pieces together of how I'm going to solve that in the future. But, how have you kind of navigated that and, been able to find that time? Maybe it might not be there, as we were talking about before, in quantity, but, finding that quality time to have with each other.
Uh, the way that we have navigated it is you become a lot more, I guess, resilient or tolerant. When I reflect on our journey with our eldest, we incredibly attentive. But now that there's number two that has come along, either number one or number two will be left to potentially cry for a little bit longer while we sort out number one. And that is particularly evident when we are on our own, and then we have two to one, essentially. The other way that we navigate it is that we will try and align where possible. So, for example, cars generally put our children to sleep, so that if we get in the car, we try and do it at a time that they are both ready to go to bed. Otherwise, it just throws everything out of whack. So I would say that we've had to be more purposeful in our planning, and a little less spontaneous, because that just causes us more pain at the end of the day. Um, and I mean that by the end of the day being bedtime at the end of the day, because that's ultimately when we get to connect as a couple. And so the better prepared we are during the day means that they get to bedtime on time, and we can have as much quality time together as possible. But if the day doesn't go according to plan and the night doesn't go according to plan, we get less and less time together before we have to go to bed and reset.
Absolutely. And look, what you just said there, that last word that you said, reset, it sort of just brought something up for me. I think it's a good question to have. We were talking about how you spend that quality time with each other, but on the other side of the spectrum, right, we got to take into account that there's going to be time when we're together that is not quality time. It's arguing, it's stress, it's figuring out what the hell we're doing and that kind of thing. And sometimes you just don't get along with each other, right? And the reason why that word reset triggered that for me is because that's the word that me and my wife use when we know that we're in those zones of conflict where we know we're stressed and things are just happening and we're just reacting to these situations. And we just have this one word that we've spoken about where we've gone, if we say reset, we both say reset, just whatever we're arguing about at the moment, put it on hold. We can talk about it later. There's bigger fish to fry right now. We've got to be on the same page. We've got to reset. And I'm wondering, do you have like a similar kind of thing?
When I get stressed or when things aren't going, I guess, according to plan, my coping mechanism is I go quiet. So I don't talk. I internalize it all. I don't want to create or aggravate the situation. I do that by internalizing it. And I now realize after several conversations with my wife that can be very frustrating and aggravating for the other person because they don't understand what's going on inside of me. And so for us, our equivalent of reset is just talking, because I know that I have a tendency to shut down and not talk. And that's been something that, I guess comes up more often, especially as more children come into the fold. You get less sleep, you are more stressed, or, that everything's just not going according to plan. And I need to make sure that I keep my communication pathways open, and in the event that it is a fairly stressful situation, that I reset by talking about what's going through my mind, and that I don't internalize it, because that just causes more frustration, and it prolongs the issue of what's going on.
It's sort of like we just figure out these constructive coping mechanisms for our defense mechanisms, right? It's something that we just figure out because I mean, what else are you going to do? It's a necessity. We've got to do this. If our, joint vision is to raise a family the best that we can, this is what we got to do, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm hijacking this podcast and asking you questions now, right?
This is a very collaborative conversation we're having right now.
So I did have another one, and it was, I think it's important because, let's think about, before we became parents, right? And you're speaking to all those people who already were, mothers and fathers, and, at least in my mind, from those conversations that I had, I felt that a lot of them were negative. It was like, oh, okay, catch up on your sleep now, like get as much as you can. It's, this is going to happen, and then I'll wait for the toddler years and that kind of thing. There was a lot of that kind of negativity around it. And, people, and I think that's, it's normal because we recognize and remember the negative things so much more than the positive things. It's just we're kind of biologically primed to do it. It's a psychological kind of mechanism. So I think it's really important to highlight, well, what are some of the most positive things that have, changed your life for the better from having, for having children? And, what's the biggest positive thing for you that comes to your mind?
The most positive thing about having children for me personally would be, I'm trying to think of the word, you are thrust into this position of, you're like an undeniable role model. Like they just stoke everything up from you, whether you like it or whether you don't. And I found that so empowering to be the best version of myself as often as I can, because I know that I have two sponges that are looking up to me all of the time. And I have found that such a positive experience for me personally, and something that I wasn't expecting. I mean, there's plenty of books out there about being parents and being dads, and got a dad of my own. But chatting to my dad about his experience as well as being a father, I guess that's brought us closer together, because I can now feel what he went through, and our conversations have matured as well in terms of what he went through in his early career as he was trying to build a family, a home, and a career, or all in parallel. And I guess coming back to that role model piece is, it's now opened my eyes to looking at men and other individuals around me that I see as great role models, and how can I take some lessons from them and apply them in the relationship that I have with my children, because I feel that power is undeniable, but also critically important in their upbringing. So role model would be the positive thing that I've uncovered as a result of being a dad.
I really, really like that. And I totally agree. It turns you, I think, just into the best version of yourself and what you really want to be, because it just motivates you to do that. It's not all about you anymore. It's about the family. It's about everyone. And you just really, it just turns you into the best version of yourself that you try to be. And I think what you talked about before there, that's really important, is, how important those conversations are with other fathers and other dads, like just what we're doing now, right? I've found that something that's been so helpful in these 7 months that, that I've become a dad is talking to my friends that are dads. Having conversations with them, meeting up with them, talking about, I'm having this problem. What do you think? Or they'll say, I'm having this problem. What do you think? And I might offer some advice. Or sometimes we might come, with a problem and we go, oh man, that sucks. That's really tough. I don't really know how I'm going to, offer any advice that's going to help you for that. But that's kind of been helpful in itself. just chatting to other people that are going through the same kind of struggles and challenges that you are, and just knowing that you're not in it alone, and being able to glean like helpful information from other people where you go, oh, I've never thought about trying that before. And also what you said about understanding your dad more, that really resonated with me. I really understand my parents more now that I'm a parent, and that, I guess it makes sense, right? But yeah, I feel like my relationship with my dad is something that's really, really matured as well. And, I'm very, very fortunate that, my parents are still in my life, and that they can be grandparents and that kind of thing. And I think that's been something that's just been a really, really positive thing about becoming a parent as well, is, being able to see the other members of your family interact with this thing, this beautiful person that you've brought into the world, and how much joy it brings them. I think that's something that, seeing that joy in other people from something that you've created is just, it's just an incredible feeling to have, I think.
That's something that I have an upcoming podcast with one of our colleagues around the fertility journey, and certainly unpacking the journey before you become a parent or before you become a dad, and how that can be quite mentally challenging as well, especially when it doesn't go according to plan. What would be the one thing for you, Elliot, that I guess you've taken out of becoming a dad, beyond, I guess, the fact that you resonate with being an incredible role model?
Look, that's a really, really good question. I would say the one thing that I've really taken out from it is that you get back what you put in.
Yeah.
You really, the more that you put in, the more effort, the more time that you dedicate towards spending time taking care of your child, the more opportunity you have to be present in those moments where they do something that's just incredible. They do something that's just absolutely beautiful and outstanding. And the more present you are, the more that you're there, the more opportunity you have to, be around those things. And I feel like, the other thing for me, a real positive, is that it's just made me so aware of taking care of myself, because my absolute priority in life is to be a good dad, to be a good husband. And I can't do that if I'm not taking care of myself. And this whole experience has made that so just clear to me. And I think that's something that's just been really helpful for me, being able to have that increased awareness around my own well-being, and how that has a flow-on effect to my family. I'd say that's been one of the biggest positives as well.
Quite a journey of personal growth, isn't it, becoming a dad?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if I reflect on what we've chatted about here, I guess our journeys began with thinking around, are we doing enough? And making sure we're having making sure we're having open conversations, and not always positive. Yeah. I think that's important to note, but making sure we've got open communication and having continual conversations within our family unit. If you have access to leave, taking it, because it's time that you will never get back. And that goes whether it's first time, second, third, or subsequent time. Those very early days, weeks, months, and years are incredibly valuable. And it's something that, at least in my experience, I feel has really benefited the relationship that I have with both of my children. And then whilst we're on the topic of leave, also making time for ourselves, whether that is through exercise, music, which we share, or cooking, or whatever else brings dads out their joy, but taking time for themselves so that they can be the best version of themselves, for those other priorities in their life being their partners and families. And then finally, in that time for ourselves is just resetting, making sure that we do reset, we become refreshed. And I am really proud of the journey that I'm on. I think it's a gift to be able to be a dad and to be the best version of the dad that I can possibly be, and it's really opened me up to conversations, to be vulnerable, to be confident, and all of the spectrum of feelings, emotions, and experiences in that. I can attribute that to becoming a dad.
Absolutely. I think, and I think maybe, a really important thing to finish off with this kind of conversation is just to recognize the importance of having this conversation that we are having at the moment. It's so important to get in contact with other dads, to talk about what you're going through, to hear their experience, for them to hear your experience, to know that you're not going through this on your own. And, who knows, you're going to find some really helpful information out there. There might be a new way to, quickly do a nappy. How good's that going to be for your time management? What are you going to find out? And I think just having the conversations, being open to them, as you said, sort of being vulnerable and allowing yourself to put yourself out there, what you're struggling with, but also how you can help other people who might be going through similar kind of, struggles, because it's tough being a new dad. So I think, amongst all those other things that we talked about, I would just like to say that, have these conversations with other people.
And for those that don't feel they have a network around them to have these conversations, that's certainly something that employee assistance programs can help with as well. And people may or may not be aware, but when you call an employee assistance program, you can share your preferences of who you would like to connect with. So if you're a dad and you'd like to connect with another dad, ask for one, so that you can connect with them, you can resonate with them, you can vibe with them, to have a really engaging conversation. And if there is a particular challenge that you're trying to work through, ask your employee assistance provider if they do have somebody that you can chat to who is an early father, or they may not have an early father, but they'll have a dad, because that's something that you can find great people like yourself, Elliot, and to help somebody else through their journey as a new dad.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, James. If it's something that you don't have access to, please, use the benefit of the employee assistance program. You can say what your preferences are. You can request to, have someone who's got kids or an early father, and I'm sure they would absolutely love to work with you.
Elliot, thank you for taking the time to share your experience and your thoughts with me here today, and I hope for our listeners that they are able to take something out of our journey as first-time fathers.
Thanks, James. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Elliot. Take care.